We are live now.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Sunita Narain, and I'm really delighted in some senses, not delighted completely because these are very tough times, but delighted that we are here together with you again. We have today some grim news, and that's what we want to put out today. And it's about the increasing frequency and intensity of extreme weather events in our world. And today, we are very clear that these are increasingly linked to climate change. Now, the reason I said that these are not good times is that we know that there are three things happening in the world, and they're happening together, and they're happening in ways that actually should make us sit up and think, but we are not. Number one, of course, the news of yesterday or the news of day before is that we have a new president-elect in the United States. It is their country, it is their democracy. But the fact of the matter is that the United States has a footprint much larger than its own country. US is the world's single largest historical emitter to greenhouse gas emissions, the stock of greenhouse gases that are in the air. Now, this matters because we know that the lifetime of, say, carbon dioxide is over 150, 170 years. So we cannot deny the historical contributions of a country because those emissions have not disappeared. Those emissions are the stock of emissions in the atmosphere, which are forcing temperatures to change. The US is also the second largest per capita, annual emitter and the largest on a per capita basis. And as I say this, the reality is that we will have a man who's heading this country as of January, who is perhaps the only surviving today at that level of leadership climate skeptic. He has openly said that climate change does not happen, is not happening. He's openly said that he will revive the energy drilling in his country. He has, as part of his plan, the price of energy will fall. There will be more drilling. Build, drill, baby, drill is the motto now. And of course, he has said very clearly that the Green Deal of Biden is history as far as he is concerned. Now, this is important, not because of the global leadership role that the US has played, but the fact is it continues to be a country with a very high emission load. And the second truth of the matter is that we are at a time of desperation. When global temperatures are increasing, today the news is that we would have breached 1.5 degrees centigrade rise even before 2030. Now, this is a blip perhaps because it's partly combined, partly because of the El Nino, that is the Pacific currents, which bring a warmer world. But the fact of the matter is it tells us how close we are to breaching the guardrail of 1.5 degrees centigrade rise. And the third fact, which we will discuss with you, is that this is no longer an academic issue where we are talking about climate change and Trump and pontificating and having, boardroom discussions on it. It's real. It's having impact on the ground. It's hitting the poorest of the poor. And this is where today's data that you will see that we have put together tells you the sheer scale of the devastation. The report that we will release right now to you is a report which is the third report of its kind, third year in which we have been producing this report, which is on the state of extreme weather events in India. My real earnest hope would be that we could do this for the entire South, but we don't have that data. But at least what this tells us is that not only are things they are bad, but they're getting worse. And that's what Kiran, Rajit will explain to you, how bad is the world getting, our world getting in front of our eyes every year, and what is the impact on people, on livelihoods. And remember, when we put out the figures, which we will to you, on the damages, the cost, these are only a fraction of what actually is the cost, because we are not collecting those figures. What we know is the real-time data in terms of the extreme weather event, because that the Indian Meteorological Department, and that's the data we depend on, they put that together and they define, how do they define an extreme event? And we will show that to you in our report. But what we don't know enough about is the human cost of this. We only have a vague idea of this, but we have put together whatever is officially available. Again, we are very careful about this. We don't want to create data points which are not reliable. So at the moment, we are using official data, but our job is to aggregate it and to present what was a snapshot into a full picture. But this is the context with which we are bringing it to you. The election of Trump, the fact that we are getting into a warmer and warmer world, which means action is not up to scale. And three, that the impacts are now happening and the impacts are showing up in our world. That's the context of today's report. I would now like to turn to my colleague, Richard Mahapatra, who's the managing editor of Down to Earth, and he is the absolute brain behind putting together this report. When a few years ago, he came to me saying, let's put this together. And I said, Richard, we won't be able to make the connections. And he said, no, we will. And he, Rajat and Kiran have done an incredible job to bring us what I believe is a complete picture, which I hope should shock us into action. Richard?
But before that, ma'am, can I request you to formally release the report?
Of course, I'd be more than happy to do so.
So this is the report, our annual report that's called Climate India 2024, and it's being qualified as an assessment of extreme weather events. You'll get to know all the details, all the findings, and how we have done it and how the data is being processed. Let me just tell you means how it's being done. It's one of its kind till now. What do we do every day? The Center for Science and Environment and Down to Earth, the data center actually collects, analyzes data every day on weather. It may be extreme weather events, it may be normal weather. Then also one after another, we also document day by day all the damages or any human toll, the other damages that's being done. As Sunita ji has already pointed out, we actually dig into all available government data released and we analyze them. And after this is the report that will capture you the first 9 months of the year, and we call it the annual. Then it gives you actually what has happened. When you join the dots, we get to see. So one way you can say that this is the third year, and if you look at it, 2024, as Kiran and Rajit will now let you know the findings, you will see that we have more disasters, more extreme weather events. Then we have actually more anomalies also, above the normal or below the normal. We have more damages in terms of human life, then also more homes, houses, livestock, and also, as we all have experienced this year, it was all daytime affair as far as temperature was concerned. And 2024 will be a landmark year also for that. We all felt that daytime hotness at night, which is basically a fundamental, hitting point or tipping point, you can say. So this is how actually we put together all the data. So it's a day-to-day work for us, which are being processed. And this report actually comes out not only processing, giving you a context, and also comparing it to our last year's things. With this, I'll request now Kiran and Rajit to show us the findings.
Kiran?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. So I think with the overall view of how India looked like in the first 9 months, and then my colleague Rajit will take you further detail and more insights of the report. So in the first 9 months of this year, we had seen around 255 days of extreme weather events out of 274 days, which had affected around 35 states. Almost the entire country was affected by these events. And in terms of percentage, if you see, this accounts for almost 93% of the total days that the country had seen extreme weather events, just in the first 9 months. And as I'm speaking, in October, we already have witnessed Dana cyclone inside Odisha. That's equally damaging. Okay, so there are more damages to be recorded as we move forward in the 3 months. Now, in terms of loss and damage, of what this meant in terms of loss and damage, the human toll of these events was huge. It was around over 3,000 lives lost due to these events in just the first 9 months. And of course, it's not just human toll. This did have an impact on the livelihood of our farmers, because this meant that around 3.2 billion hectares of cropped area was damaged due to these events. And as Sundaji said, that this is again a fraction of the damage that we have recorded to various sources. And if you further go deeper inside the report, you will find that these damages do not account for larger states like Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, who were equally affected by these crops. And another estimate of the scale of damage is through the kind of crops that were affected. For example, see the entire 9 cash crops as well. So the damage is huge in terms of impact on farmers. Livestock damage, we were not able to record much, but there was over 9,000 livestock died due to this event for just in the first 9 months. Now, so as we were always seeing, the science always claims that the world is warming and the events are increasing in number and the frequency. But the report clearly shows it's not just the science, it's the reality that's happening right now. And that's what the report clearly shows. Since it's the third year of the report, and we have compared the trends from 2002 onwards. And what we found was, again, very worrying. Even though all of us are fighting to save our world, but despite that, the number of extreme weather events have actually increased in terms of not just frequency, but also the impact they had on the country. If we talk in terms of percentage, so this year, 93% of days the country recorded these events, which is up from 86% in 2022 and 88% in 2023. That means there's been continuous increase over the last 3 years. And so what this meant in terms of impact on us, this meant that the loss in terms of human and economic losses as well. Again, if you compare these losses, again, there's been a substantial increase in the losses that the country has witnessed. If you talk in terms of human toll, human lives lost in the country have increased by 18% in just 3 years. Okay? And this is again an underestimate. If you talk about the crop area affected due to these events, that's mind-boggling. It really it should make us, it should wake up with all of us. When we talk in terms of farmers, the farmers' lives have been impacted, and the report clearly shows that, because we have lost, there's an increase of 71% in the area lost due to these events from 2002 onwards. And this is a huge number. And once again, I'd like to repeat, this doesn't account for larger states like Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, and Punjab. The report also gives you a regional insight on 4 regions that IMD classifies. What we found was, among the 4 regions, central region was the most affected by these events in terms of number of days and also the damages that the region had suffered. the central injured region had seen 18 days during the year where the extreme weather events were recorded. And again, what this meant that the region had the highest human toll amongst all the 4 regions. Over 1,000 lives were lost in this part of the country. And this also damaged over 2 million hectares of crop area. And if you see this table on the right-hand side, this shows that the largest damage was seen in Maharashtra. Madhya Pradesh was equally affected, but we couldn't find more numbers on Madhya Pradesh. That means there's a higher possibility that MP was equally affected, but the numbers are not there. And you have Gujarat. And so as a result of this, this region suffered the maximum loss in terms of agriculture. Now, when we talk in terms of days, after central region, Northwest recorded maximum number of days with 213 days of events country has seen. But in terms of damage, it is not that severe, the report shows. It's not good news. It's because this is the data gap we are talking about. Northwest region, which has Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Punjab, Haryana, all other states. But we couldn't find enough data on the losses in these states. Therefore, although the region is second in terms of number of days it has seen extreme weather events, but the losses are not clearly visible in this, which means we need to really track our losses and damages seriously and much better and regularly as well. It's the Northeast region. It's a very important part of the country. And this year, this region, when we have been comparing this for the last 3 years, what we found was usually Assam was always in the news. That's not a surprise. This time, Tripura was in the news. And what this meant was this region had recorded 191 days of extreme weather events. This is larger than last year, substantial increase. And this also meant that this region suffered huge loss to the crop area as well. Okay, and if you see the table on the right hand side, Tripura, a very, very small state, had seen crop loss of area lost of around 1 lakh hectares. Okay, and of course you have Bihar and West Bengal, larger states, and the table clearly shows that. But what this meant is that this region is really vulnerable. Okay, and this year it was clearly shown. And just to reiterate, Tripura's the loss is actually because of a cyclone that affected this region. Okay, but the loss is huge. This means that the region needs to be prepared for these kinds of events. We need better preparedness for this region, which is already highly vulnerable. Followed by this, we have southern region. Again, a very important part of the country. And also in terms of days, you can see this is the fourth in terms of days, 168 days recorded extreme weather events. But in terms of losses, there are important states like Kerala. Kerala had the maximum number of human lives lost this year. Of course, this is because of landslides. But what this meant was, if you find the studies that we have researched, there's a link. There's a link with the climate change to this event. At the same time, the mindless the human activities that is being going on in this region also was responsible. So we just can't blame climate for this part, for this damage. Our activities are equally responsible. We have to make note of that. So we can't blame climate for everything. But this report also shows that besides this, there are other reasons which are very important that should be noted down. And Kerala is a classic example of that. If you see in terms of human loss, Andhra Pradesh is the highest in terms of loss. But the cropped area is again higher in this part of the region. You have Tamil Nadu, Telangana as well. But once again, we couldn't find enough data on this. And the reports were, just to reiterate, the data that we have got on this is from media reports. But we'll be very careful with that. We have taken those media reports which actually cite the government estimates that they have come across. Okay, so these reports, the numbers are actually credible, and we can trust these numbers. We also compared the region also over the last 3 years. What we found was, again, a very striking trend that we came across, that all the regions in the country have reported more number of extreme weather days. Okay, so so the trend is clearly clear that it is a reality that is affecting all of us, and the entire country is being affected. We can't deny this reality anymore. But amongst all the regions, the central region of the country was the worst hit. And if you, so what this meant, how we are saying this, it's because, again, the region, in this region, 80% of days, the region had seen extreme weather events. This again up from 73% of the last 2 years. In terms of the damage to human lives and to the cropped area, once again, you can see over here that this is a huge rise of 13% of human lives lost in this region since 2022. Now, when we talk about the crop area loss, that's huge. And just to put it in the perspective, if you see, this is a large chunk of the total loss the country suffered this year. Of the 3.2 million hectares, 2.08 million hectares was just in this part of the country. And so this is very, very important part of the country. But within this region, Maharashtra alone accounted for 93% of the losses that we have seen this year to the crop area. Okay. Now, when we try to correlate this with the number of extreme weather events, okay, there's a link. It's because Maharashtra had seen more number of day events in this period. The state saw 142 days where the extreme weather events were recorded. And this is a huge increase from 106 days in 2023 and 112 in 2022, which means there's a link between the number of the increase in extreme weather days and the losses that we are suffering. Okay. Let's come to South Peninsula. Okay. Once again, this region has seen an increase in number of days with extreme weather events. 61% of days the state had recorded these events. This is again up from 46% in 2022. But what this meant, a huge loss for human lives. The region lost 762 human lives in this period. This is a jump from 350 in 2022, a rise of 117%. And if you put it in perspective, this is almost double of the loss to human lives in the last 2 years. So now we can't deny the losses that we are suffering because of these events. We also made an attempt to see how the states are faring. What we found was that in 27 states and UTs in the country, they have witnessed an increase in weather events. You can see the orange bars on in this slide. There are many number of orange bars which are on the right hand side, and you can see the difference. Okay, that clearly shows that the events have increased in these states compared to 2023. Okay. This is an immediate trend. And of these, 2 southern states, Karnataka and Kerala, along with Uttar Pradesh, had experienced 40 more days of such events. This clearly speaks of the impact that we are having on the ground. What we also, while we got work with the database, we realized that, as we told you, that we actually track daily press releases that IMD puts out. We realized that this year IMD made a special effort to put out information on warm nights that we have been facing. In the past 2 years, we never saw this statement in the press releases. For the first time, they made this information available in the press release. And we also analyzed that, although this is not part of the database that we put out online, but this report has a data set on this part as well. And what the data shows is that 17 states and UTs have seen warm night conditions from March to June 2024. And the first warm night of the year was recorded in central India, once again central India, where Gujarat had Madhya Pradesh had seen this on 27th of October. After that, the events moved on to other parts of the country. But as we moved to June, there were events which were more worrying, more severe, and termed as severe warm nights. And they happened in northern states of the country. At the same time, Orissa also was not spared. Orissa was the first state to see severe warm night in the country in the month of April. You can see that the table on the left-hand side clearly shows that as we move to June, there's a dark red shade that means severe warm nights. And Orissa has one dark shade of red in the month of April. But then the other dark shades of red are in the month of June for all northern states. Okay? Amongst these, Chandigarh, Delhi, and Haryana, they had seen 4 consecutive days of severe warm nights. What does that mean? That means if you track the news reports around this period, you'll see there was news reports on human lives lost due to heat waves, heat during these period. This means the warm nights have impacted the human health conditions. And this also meant loss of human lives. So we need to also record this part that we all wait for nights after heat waves. We thought, okay, nights will be much cooler, but this time, this year did not see that. And if you go deeper into this, you realize that there are other states like Rajasthan, which had seen a longer stretch of warm nights in the month of May itself. Uttar Pradesh had the longest stretch of warm nights in the month of May. And to put it up, all this meant a loss of human lives. Nobody has said that this due to warm nights, but if you see the science, it has been done very clear that although heat waves do kill people, but if the nights are warmer, the chances of human life getting lost is much higher. Research clearly shows that. In fact, Lancet has come out with a report recently. That report talks about how the country has been seeing warmer nights over the last decade, and there has been an increase in this event over the last decade. So, and that's a core reality that we have to acknowledge and accept it. And this also means that we need to be prepared to deal with this, because although we are trying, the world is trying its best, but we are still seeing an increase in extreme weather conditions, which is a direct impact of climate change. And that's it from my side. Now, Rajit will talk about more insights from the report. Rajit, please.
Thank you, Kiran. And Rajit, please go ahead. And thank you, Kiran. That was a very good overview.
1 second.
Yeah, no problem, Rajit. I think the most worrying part, Richard, as you have captured in this report this time, has really been this new data on warm nights. And as you know, we have been putting out the understanding that the fact that nights are getting warmer has a higher human impact, health impact. And that the health impact of warmer nights means more mortality. And that's really what should worry us. But that's, as Kiran very rightly said, these are all about both the changing climate and the fact that we are also making sure that things are getting worse because our cities are getting more concretized. We have more and more cooling and heating systems which are adding, and of course, we have more and more traffic on the roads. So not only are we contributing, but climate change is that double whammy. Rajit, please go ahead.
Thanks a lot, ma'am. So I'll take over from where Kiran has left. So what we will cover in this presentation is we'll look at the season-wise and the month-wise analysis of extreme weather events this year. We will also look at the individual extreme weather events to understand which is more severe, which is less severe, and what kind of damage is happening because of it. We will then talk about the source for the data set. How are we sourcing the numbers? And finally, we will give you a preview of a dashboard that we've created, which is where we have the raw data, which is powering this report. So the idea is that the dashboard is free to use for everyone, and we update it almost every month as and when the data is available. So the idea is that you can create your own stories and analysis based on the raw data, which would be much more insightful. So starting with the seasonal analysis, what we found, and these are by far the 3 biggest takeaways. The first is the fact that on 7 of the 9 months that we're talking about, so we're talking from January till September, 7 of the months, each and every day, some part of the country was experiencing an extreme weather event. So out of the 9 months, 7 months, and this includes January and April, January being a cold month, it falls under the winter classification. April is a warm month. So usually we don't see so many extreme weather event days, at least in the past 2 years that we've been looking at it. These 2 months do not have extreme weather events on each and every day. So the later part from May till September, or rather from June to September, it is basically your monsoon period. So over there, usually we have heavy rainfall, which is one of the classifications of extreme weather events. So over there, we usually find extreme weather events on every day. But for January and April, this is very unlikely, and which is very, very alarming as well. So 7 out of the 9 months. So this tells you the frequency of extreme weather events in India. Then we move on to the spread of these extreme weather events. So we also found that in 6 consecutive months, starting from April till September, so April, May, June, July, August, and September, the 6 consecutive months, what we found was that 30 or more states and UTs were recording extreme weather events. So you can understand the spread of these extreme weather events as well. So it is not concentrated to one specific region. So that is another point that we were able to find out. And what we also found was that human deaths were reported in all the 9 months. Obviously, in January, it was the lowest, which was 6 deaths because of cold wave and cold days. And July was the highest in terms of human deaths. So it was 1,196 deaths. But if you look at it, all 9 months, there were human toll. So there is a loss and damage angle to it across all the 9 months as well. So we've looked at the spread, we've looked at the frequency, and we are also looking at the loss and damage result because of that. Over here, I'll just quickly run through. You can go through the PPT if you want to have a clearer idea of this. So basically what I've done is I've looked at month-wise. So winter is January and February. So in that, we found 50 out of the 60 days. We found that 19 states and UTs were affected in these 2 months. And we found that cold waves was the most recurring or most problematic extreme weather event type, which happened on 38 of those 50 days. Then we found that 15 people died in these 2 months, and a crop loss of around 41,000 hectares was recorded. Punjab and Haryana, this year they were the worst hit, and they recorded, both of them recorded on 34 days each, followed by Uttar Pradesh and Rajasthan. Similarly, if you look at pre-monsoon, it's 83 out of 92 days, out of which now we know that starting from April, it is almost all the days. Not starting from April, sorry, in April as well, it was all the days. So we found that during the pre-monsoon period, which is basically the summer period, so IMD classifies it as pre-monsoon, so we've gone ahead with the same classification. So the summer period, 34 states and UTs recorded extreme weather events, much higher than in the winter months. Lightning and storms, and in this, so lightning and storms is a classification which includes a lot of different kinds of storm systems, including hailstorms. So lightning and storms was the most predominant or most visible extreme weather event type, which happened on 71 of these 83 days, followed by heat waves, which happened on 54 days, and heavy rains, floods, and landslides on 40 days. Then in terms of the loss and damage, 507 people died because of these extreme weather events, and 0.12 million hectare was affected because of these events. Madhya Pradesh now becomes, so from Punjab and Haryana in the winter season, now Madhya Pradesh has become the worst hit, and with 49 days of extreme weather events in these 3 months. Then Maharashtra and West Bengal. Then we move to the monsoon period, which usually is the most devastating in terms of extreme weather events. That is what we've seen in the past 3 years. So over here, we've seen that all 122 days, there were extreme weather events happening in some part of the country. And over here, we again see that 35 states and union territories recorded extreme weather events. So the only union territory that is not there in this year's analysis was Dadra, Nagar, and Daman and Diu. So which is basically the only UT which did not record any extreme weather event this year, at least in the first 9 months. Barring them, all states and UTs, including the smaller ones like Lakshadweep, Andaman and Nicobar, there were at least a few days of extreme weather events over there as well. Then again, heavy rains, floods and landslides was the most predominant, and it was recorded in all 122 days. It was followed by lightning and storms, and heat waves were also recorded in the early part of monsoon as well, which basically shows how heat wave season is getting extended in the recent years. Then we had cloudbursts and we had cyclones in 4 days. So one distinction over here that we made, so we count cyclone only when the cyclone has made landfall, and immediately because of the cyclone there is a rainfall or there is damage. Beyond that, all the other days when there are rainfall that are happening in nearby states and all, we have clubbed it under heavy rains, floods and landslides, because it is a result of the cyclone, but it is not directly the cyclone. So that is a distinction that we've kept. So there were 2 cyclones that happened, and there were 4 days that happened. So basically, it was the day of the landfall and 1 day afterwards. So that is basically what we've kept under the cyclones. So the maximum damage. Then Assam was the worst hit in the monsoon period, closely followed by Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh, 105 days each over here. So once we've looked at the season, now let's look at the extreme weather event types. Lightning and storm is, at least this year, was the most frequently happening extreme weather event. So it happened on 191 out of the 274 days. It affected 31 states and union territories. Madhya Pradesh being the worst hit, 103 days of lightning and storms. Maharashtra a second at 76 days. And lightning and storms resulted in 1,021 human deaths, a little above 1,000 human deaths. And again, Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh were the worst hit in terms of deaths due to lightning and storms. In heavy rain, floods and landslides, we see 67 days. It's marginally lower than lightning and storms. It was also spread across 31 states and union territories. Over here, Assam had the maximum, 122 days, followed by Kerala. Human deaths is higher than lightning and storms, 1,910. Over there, it was a little above 1,000. This is close to 2,000. And Kerala and Assam recorded the maximum number of human deaths under heavy rains, floods, and then we move on to heat waves. People in Delhi, we would be very worried about this. So heat waves we found was happened on 77 days out of the 274 days. And we found that 26 states and union territories were affected by it. And I was quite surprised when I looked at it. So Odisha had the maximum number of heat waves this year, more than Delhi. So 39 days in Odisha. Second was Rajasthan, 35 days. Delhi was, I think, around 25 or 26. I'm not very sure about the number. So in terms of human deaths, Odisha had the maximum number of human deaths because of heat waves as well, 60, followed by Bihar, which is 49. Cold wave happened on 38 of the 274 days. I'll just quickly run through because these are smaller impact in terms of extreme weather events. So, cold wave happened in, and 6 deaths happened in cold wave. Then we had cloudbursts. Cloudbursts happened on 14 days. 3 states were affected, Himachal, Uttarakhand, and Jammu and Kashmir. And out of that, human deaths were 33, and they happened in Himachal Pradesh and Jammu and Kashmir. These were the 2 places where deaths happened. Cyclone again is 7 days over here. And what we found was that 9 states were affected by it. So Rajasthan happened on 4 days, Gujarat happened on 4 days, and Madhya Pradesh happened on 4 days. And human deaths is 57. Again, the same distinction. So we have clubbed the related extended impact of cyclones in terms of heavy rains and floods in under heavy rains and floods, and only the day of landfall and the day afterwards. These are the 2 days that are there in cyclones mentioned over here under this classification. Snowfall happened on 1 day in Jammu and Kashmir, and 1 death was recorded over there. So now that we have a broad idea of what all is there in terms of the spread, we'll talk briefly about the report sources, how we go about. So we use India Meteorological Department to ascertain the number of days with extreme weather events. So where we are saying that 93% of the days have recorded extreme weather events. So for that, we rely on India Meteorological Department. So what IMD comes out with is it comes out with a daily press release. In that daily press release, it talks about all the extreme weather events that have happened in the 24 hours prior to that. So we basically are monitoring that. Then we also, IMD comes up with a monthly analysis. For each month it comes, so basically around 10-15 days after the month gets over, they come up with a monthly analysis. In that, we re-verify the daily assessments that are there. Along with that, we also look at some loss and damage data, which is mentioned over there. So in the daily press release, they only talk about the extreme weather events. They don't talk about the loss and damage. But in the monthly analysis, they also talk about the loss and damage figures as well. So the interesting bit is that in this press release, IMD relies on media reports for the loss and damage. Then the second source that we rely on is the Disaster Management Division, which comes under the Ministry of Home Affairs. We look at it purely for the loss and damage bit of it. So what the division does is that during the monsoon period, so the date is not fixed. Some years it comes a little early, some years it comes a little late. During the monsoon period, it starts and it comes out with the situation report. What the situation report talks about is the amount of evacuations that have happened, the amount of loss and damage that has happened, the amount of houses that have been affected. So all the loss and damage sections that we have looked at specifically for the monsoon period and a month prior to that is based on the disaster management division's number. So they earlier would come up with a cumulative number. However, this year they have stopped coming out with a cumulative number and they have started coming out with a daily number. Earlier, they had daily and cumulative numbers, and this is something that while we were analyzing, we found out in the previous years when we would add up all the daily numbers, it would usually be slightly higher than the slightly lower than the cumulative numbers. So the cumulative numbers at the end of the month would be slightly higher. Now they have stopped coming out with the cumulative numbers. So this year we have only relied on the daily numbers that they come up with, and we basically added those up. Even though in the past 2 years, our experience suggests that the cumulative numbers are slightly higher, which makes sense because loss and damage reporting might take some time. So in the cumulative, it comes together because in the daily, it might not be reflected properly. Finally, for the non-monsoon periods, we also look at media reports. So we are talking about January, Feb, and March, which are basically cloudbursts and events like snowfall and deaths because of that. We also look at media reports. And for crop damage, so Ministry of Home Affairs comes out with the crop damage data as well. That is the basic, that is the majority of the numbers that we have. But at times we also find that there are media reports where they are quoting state governments. So we also rely on that at times as well. Why do we do that? So basically the hierarchy with which loss and damage is recorded in India is basically it starts from the district level. Then it goes to the state level. So all state governments also have disaster management authorities. And then it comes to the central level. So what we have found is that at times the process takes longer and the numbers get diminished over time. So media reports are very quick to talk about the state disaster management and the state government report as that is coming up. We are not able to tap and manually look at all the state disaster management data because they don't release it regularly. So basically what happens is if certain place had a massive crop damage, so the local government over there or the state government will come up with a number based on, let's say, the disaster management's number of the state. So then we also capture those and we verify those with the disaster with the central numbers. And then if there is any discrepancy, we add the additional numbers. So let's say the center is saying 100 units and we found from the state media reports 120. So we'll add the additional 20 as well into that. So loss and damage, we are trying to also gauge through this. So I'll just repeat once more. The number of extreme weather events is from IMD. Loss and damage is through IMD, Ministry of Home Affairs. These are the two main sources. And media reports for freak events which are not covered in these, like cloudbursts and snowfall. Finally, I would want to talk about this. This is my last slide. So basically, when we started off with this analysis, what we also did was we came up with a dashboard. So in the report, we have analyzed it the way we thought was the most important. However, each individual, depending on the kind of work that we do, we might have different take on it and we might want to analyze different portions of it. So the entire raw data is available on our dashboard. And this is the dashboard. The link to the dashboard is visible at the bottom. I'll just quickly jump and I'll show you the dashboard in a minute. So this is how the dashboard looks when you reach the dashboard. And we update it regularly. So what you can do over here is, if you see on the left-hand side, you have data for all the 3 years. So we have 2020 and 24. Then I click on 2023, and you see that it changes 318 out of 365 days. This is for the entire year. So you can check the year-wise information. You can also filter it by months. So I want to understand what happens in January. I want to see what happens in January and Feb. So this is basically what it is. So you can look at it year-wise. You can also filter it month-wise. And what is the information that we have? This India map that you see over here, this India map shows the number of days of extreme weather events. So when I click on Madhya Pradesh for 2024, it says 176 days. If I go to Rajasthan, it's 124 days. So all the state individual breakup you can see in terms of extreme weather events. At the bottom, this looks a little intimidating initially. So these are daily extreme weather events that are happening, and the length of the bar is the number of states and UTs that recorded it. So if I, let's say, look over here, and if I see on 13th of January, 4 states experienced cold waves or cold days. They were Uttar Pradesh, Delhi, Haryana, and Punjab. So these are the daily granular data that is available, and the color coding is based on the extreme weather event type that you can see at the top. And the length is dependent on how many states and UTs were affected. So you can basically filter it down by month if you want to see granularly. So I'll just take January so that it's easier to understand. So you can see all the 31 days of January, there were extreme weather events, and cold wave was what happened on all 31 days. So you can see, okay, on 1st of January, 6 states and UTs had it. So, and similarly, if you see at the top, we have the loss and damage panel. This, we are looking at 4 criteria. We are looking at human deaths. We are looking at crop area affected. We are looking at houses damaged, and we are looking at animal deaths. So these are the 4 parameters that you can also have a look at. So the reason why we came up with this dashboard, and in fact, this is very interesting. I just quickly share this idea with you. So I know right now there are a lot of teachers in Delhi, in some schools in Maharashtra, where they're using this dashboard as a tool to teach their primary kids extreme weather events, because extreme weather events is a part of their curriculum. So new education policy, climate change is a subtopic. So what they do is, they ask kids who are like 7, 8 years old, 10 years old, to identify the number of extreme weather events that happened on their birthdays. So kids have an activity over there. So they go there and they look at all the extreme weather events that have happened over there. Then they start a conversation around it. So they say, let's say in my city or in my state, it is heat wave. So what are the emergency kits that you need? You need water. You need to be dehydrated properly. Or if it is a flood event that is happening somewhere, which are the elevated portions in that city. So kids are actually talking about this. And what I have, the feedback that I've got from teachers so far is that they say that extreme weather event is otherwise such a gloomy topic. There are disasters, there are visuals which are very scarring. Instead of that, when we look at the tool, it is just numbers. So kids are able to talk about it. Kids are not scared of it, but they are aware of it. And that is basically what is important. And I'm confident there are many such examples. I know researchers who are using it. I know media journalists who are using it. So the idea is that you can use this dashboard to also create your own stories, which can be different from what CSA is doing. I'll just stop over here, ma'am. Over to you.
Very much. It's fascinating. What scares me, Rajat, is, I had started using a term called the new normal, and I stopped because I was scared that we are almost normalizing what is clearly something that should worry us. But I think it is a good thing if kids can understand, children can understand that this is happening in our world and we need to do something about it. And I think that is very important. I have a few questions. Firstly, I want to thank everybody who has put your comments with such warmth, such graciousness on our chat box to thank us. Thank you for your words of support. These mean a lot. The work that we do is tough, and we do this in the hope that it makes a difference. And for us, it makes a difference when all of you appreciate it. So it's really very, very nice to read the words. And I hope that Rajit, you and Kiran, who've been busy making the presentation, will take some time to actually read some of the comments that you have received. It is really heartening. So a few questions I have here, which I want to direct to you and Kiran, and to discuss a few things more data related. Okay. Now, one of the big issues that is coming out, one question that I had, of course, from Daniel Munster, I have a question on air pollution. But Daniel, that's a separate database that we put out. This is on extreme weather events. And air pollution is not so much a weather event. Of course, it is related that if you do not have wind, and if it's in winter, when moisture goes up, the pollutions go up, the pollution level becomes more extreme for us. But this is really not the purpose of this report. The one question that I had put down is from Shashikant Bhatnagar, who has also congratulated you for your work, but also in his Q&A, he has asked that your warm day events. Now, what my understanding, Kiran and Rajat, is that you have got the data from IMD. IMD has a definition called warm day events. In fact, Rajat, what I wanted was if you can take a minute to show people the page in which you and Kiran have in the report put the definitions of how IMD defines extreme weather events. I think that will make it clearer to people if you can open it.
Yes, ma'am. I'll just do that now.
And then we have a lot of questions, a group of questions really, from the issue of damages. And Kailash Nathan is asking that, do you have data from the Agriculture Ministry or ICR from crop damages? I also had a question on how have you compared the cumulative data of last year with the daily data this year? Can you actually make it comparable? So I think on loss and damage, maybe you can help us to understand a little bit about how you collect the data on this. And then, of course, Hariharan Shankar has asked that, can you link it with other aspects? And I'll also give an answer on it. But let's talk about, firstly, the definition of extreme weather events. And let's understand from you and Kiran a little more about how you collect the data from the Ministry of Home Affairs on the loss and damage, and how robust in some senses this is or isn't it, and what is it that we have as data source. So let's get to the page on definition that you had in the report, and
yes,
further up, this one.
Yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, there are two things that I want to clarify beforehand. So, in this book, what we have done is we have extreme weather events, and then we have another chapter on warm nights. I'm assuming
Yes.
warm nights is what we're talking about. So,
Yes.
warm nights is not part of the database because
Yes.
warm nights is not an extreme weather event per se, but we know it will become in the future. So, IMD this year for the first time started talking about warm nights and coming out with press releases around it. So we have captured the warm nights. It's a separate chapter that is over here, but the numbers do not include warm nights.
Yes.
So according to IMD, these are the extreme weather events that are there. We have got lightning and storms, and this is the IMD definition for it. We have got heavy rains, floods, and landslide. This is the definition for it. So you can go through the definition.
Now, it's important to understand that they have defined heavy rain as rain which is considered heavy, very heavy, when it crosses these marks. Okay.
Yes.
And what I feel, Rajat, and I hope we can do next year, Kiran, is that heavy rain also can be related to the number of hours it comes in. Because it would be good to see whether we can make that correlation, because that's what leads to the kind of devastation we are seeing now. I'm not sure if it's possible through the IMD data, but let's consider this for next year.
Okay. Okay, ma'am. Then we have heat waves. So while these are the definitions that IMD uses, the classification or the number of days is decided by IMD in its press release. So we are not monitoring these levels. IMD is doing the science behind it. So ascertaining, so on this day, these states had extremely heavy rainfall. So IMD has done the classification. We have just taken those numbers and collated it. So we are not checking whether these temperature breaches actually happen because IMD does a very good job of it. So IMD is doing this. So these are the extreme weather events that we have looked at. And I'll again make a slight clarification over here. These are the weather events because these are short-term events that happen and they cause a lot of damage. Drought is a climate event because it's a long-term event. So drought is also not included. So we normally, when we think of extreme weather events, we think of droughts. Drought is something that is an extreme climate event technically because it happens over a long period of time. So that is also not included. Other than that, all the other lightning and storms, heavy rains, floods and landslides, heat waves, cold waves, snowfall, cloudbursts, and cyclones. These are the 7 extreme weather events, and these are the definitions that IMD uses. Classifications are done by IMD. It is also collected by IMD. We are just taking those numbers and we are putting it through the 24-hour, the daily press release that they come up with. Now we move on to the loss and damage bit of it. Loss and damage. So IMD comes up with a, ma'am, do you want me to show the website? Or so IMD comes out with a monthly report as well. In the monthly
I think this is good enough, Rajat. We are running out of time as well. I think essentially just to explain to people, this is it. Give a little more detail in terms of how you have captured the warm nights and what is the data that IMD is now putting out in terms. That's a very powerful graphic that you put out, Kiran, in which you actually showed that warm nights. And remember, we are also talking about the wet bulb now. So it's not just warm nights, but also the wet bulb phenomena, which is beginning to be caught in this data. But this is data from IMD now in terms of warm nights. And this for the first time was available and you have captured it as well.
Absolutely, ma'am.
I think it's incredible that IMD is doing this, and we need to thank IMD for the fact that they have been very proactive in putting out this information.
So, ma'am, IMD defines warm nights as basically if in the morning the daytime temperature or the maximum temperature is more than 40 degrees Celsius, then if the night time or the minimum temperature is, there are different thresholds for that. So first requirement is that it has to be 40 degrees daytime temperature or the maximum temperature. This is the definition at the bottom. And then if it is the minimum temperature, there is an anomaly of 4 to 6.4 degrees. Then it is a severe warm night, and then or 4 to 6.4, and then there is another of 6.4 or more above normal. Huh? So the anomaly is basically what we're talking about for the nighttime temperature or the minimum temperature. So first we need really hot morning, and then we need a unusually hot night as well for it to be called warm nights.
Wonderful. Okay. Richard, you want to add anything to this as a final comments before I wrap up? Richard?
Ma'am, I think if you look at it after the 3 years and day to day, it's nearly 1,000 days of monitoring the extreme weather. So 2-3 things are very coming up. That 4 years ago, the geographical spread of any extreme weather events was limited. So it's almost like a pan-India. Second, the extreme weather events calendar-wise. So it's no more seasonal anymore. You know, like this example of getting heat wave declared in April and in June. So those are also new things that coming up. And the third one, warm nights, definitely, I think it has entered it, but we all felt uncomfortable since last 3 years also, feeling it. But the way it has gone up in the first data set also, it shows that it's not it happened this year.
Yeah.
So it's day and night are basically blurring as our experience with warming and heat. So that's, I think, just I wanted to put.
Thank you, Richard. And again, thank you, Rajat and Kiran, for this extraordinary work that you do. I just want to inform everybody about the kind of effort it takes. What Rajat explained to you in terms of the source of data, he kind of just said, IMD puts out a daily press release. You have to understand what we have to do. We have to download that press release. We then have to feed it into an Excel sheet. We then have to make sense out of it. So, and it's a daily job. So that's the effort it takes. And then, of course, the database comes together, and then, of course, the analysis, and then the visualization. And I think that's the incredible power of data. And here we have used government data, official data, but we have been able to present to you what that data actually shows. And what is the trend coming over the years? So the trend is showing worsening. The trend is showing that even with the fact that you are getting more and more extreme weather events, and we are beginning to start to capture more and more of the impact of that on the ground. Now, what this also is something that we need to remind ourselves always, we do not have the full picture as when it comes to loss and damage. Please make sure that you keep that in mind. We can give you with some confidence that Rajat and Kiran have managed to give you a full picture in terms of the extreme weather events, because this IMD does very carefully and puts together on a daily basis. However, the collection of data on what is the impact of this on the loss and damage is patchy. And many of you have noted it in your comments as well. It's also about methodology. It's also about how you collect, who will collect. Because remember, a lot of the, this is where you go back to everybody loves a good drought, everybody loves a good flood. How do you actually make sure that the data on loss and damage is not either inflated, it is not even underestimated? And how will you make sure it is timely? How will you make sure that it is put together in a database? We are well aware that government itself is struggling with this. They're doing their best, but it is tough. And I think that's why for us, the human picture has to be something that each one of you, as you are seeing this data, must keep that in mind. It is not about the number of the loss and damage, but the human being behind it. When we talk about lost warmer nights, keep in mind the fact that there is now more and more evidence that people are literally dying in our cities because they are not able to deal with the nighttime temperature that is not going down. The science of this is that bodies need time to cool down. And now the nighttime temperatures is not going down. And this, in fact, leads to higher mortality. Maybe not in people like us, because we can put on the fan, turn on the AC, but it is about the poor, the laborers, the farmers, the people who live in the worst conditions in our cities. And this then is really that final point that I want to make, which Kiran made many times in her presentation. And I want to emphasize it, that when we talk about the extreme weather event, we know it is happening. But the damage of the extreme weather event is partly to do with the fact that we are doing bad development and the fact that this is the increased frequency of this intense event. So if Kerala had the worst landslides possible, they were also because Kerala and many parts of the Western Ghats are still building the stone quarries and still doing development as if there was no tomorrow. It's the same with the Himalayas. It's the same with the city of Delhi. If we have floods in Delhi, it's not only because we have high rainfall in Delhi, it's because we have destroyed our lakes, ponds, our drains in our cities. So the data on extreme weather events is the powerful data that helps us to make the full picture of how bad things are getting year by year as the revenge of nature. As far as the impact of that is concerned, it is both what we have done and the fact that this is the increasing events because of climate change. And that's the complexity that we must keep in mind. But that's also the hope that we should have, because if we have destroyed it, we can also fix it. And that's really what I hope that we can now work towards and make sure that this happens. So a lot more questions that we have. We will definitely look at these in more detail, but yes, a lot of them are things that we will work on and keep working on so that we can keep bringing you the information that we can use to at least inform ourselves and perhaps inform the young in our world and inform to make better policies and, of course, better practice. So thank you very much once again, Rajat, Kiran, Richard, for this extraordinary work. And the report is now public. It is on our website. The presentations will be put up as well, and so will the press release for all journalists. All the data we put out is always in public domain. So thank you very much for all your comments and your support. Really means a lot when you write to us telling us that you believe that we are doing good work. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.